In this video, we're going to be looking at how Power BI Sentinel can help you better manage your Power BI estate. My name's Alex Whittles. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and Principal Consultant at Purple Frog, the company behind Power BI Sentinel. Power BI Sentinel has been created to help increase the governance, auditability and management and disaster recovery of your Power BI estate. As Power BI grows in your organization, it really does enable and empower users to become more data-driven, but with that becomes an increasing problem of how do you monitor, manage and keep track of what's going on. What happens when things go wrong, when someone deletes a report? How do you know where your data is being exposed? Where is it coming from? Who's accessing it? And Power BI Sentinel has been created to solve all of these problems. So let's jump into the Power BI Sentinel portal and have a look to see what it looks like. So it's an entirely web-based platform, software as a service, all hosted inside the Microsoft Azure data centers. Here we can see the homepage. All of the security is fully integrated with your Power BI estate. So if someone can log into your Power BI estate and see 10 workspaces, automatically they'll be able to see the same 10 workspaces in Power BI Sentinel. The security is fully integrated. There's no need to manage that separately. It's a very low maintenance system. So let's jump straight into the data source lineage, probably one of the most important parts of the system, that shows you what data is accessed and where. Here we can see a list of all the different types of data source used by any Power BI report in your tenants. So we can see analysis services, cubes, MySQL, Oracle, SAP, HANA, etc. We're going to choose SQL Server, and we can choose a particular database. Once we choose this, Sentinel is going to build us a picture of that lineage, where the data is coming from, where it's going to. So, for example, we can see here, this is the source database, the server, the database, etc. It's coming through a data flow, through a couple of data sets. We can even see here, this one's using row-level security, so you can very easily see where security is applied in your data. And these are consumed by a number of different reports here. Note they're in different workspaces. Sentinel lineage covers your entire tenant, regardless of workspace. And that makes it far more powerful than you can get from the built-in Power BI lineage. And then it includes apps on the side here. If you've got Power BI Premium, you can see data going down to a table level. So these are the tables inside this source database that are being pulled out into Power BI. So we can see we've got fact internet sales, dim date, dim customer, dim product, etc. I can choose a particular table and filter the diagram to just show Power BI entities that use that particular table. So here we see the reduced view that's limited to just those data sets, reports and apps that contain data from dim customer. Now this makes it very, very easy to look at things like GDPR. Where's my data being exposed, my sensitive PII data being exposed? But also from an impact analysis perspective, I want to make a change to this table or view or data source. What's the potential impact across all of the entities across my entire Power BI estate? We can also look in more detail about this. So let's right-click and view things like workspace permissions. And we can see here all of the users that have admin, member or contributor rights to that particular workspace. And we can do this on various things, gateway details, dataset permissions, refresh schedules, etc. We can also look at column search to search the estate for where specific columns or calculations appear. So let's do a search for tax. So this has found all of the columns and calculations that contain the wildcard tax, so anywhere in the name of the column or calculation. And it gives us the detail about where it is, the workspace, the report name, table name, etc. And if we scroll down, I think we've got some calculations here. There we go. So we've got some calculations, even if the actual measure name doesn't include the wildcard tax. We can see here part of the DAX calculation does include tax, therefore it appears in the search. Now if we want to look at one of these calculations or data sets, maybe we want to use it to create a new report, to save creating a new data set. Very helpful to find existing content in your estate to build new reports off the top of. We can look at this and say, right, what's this particular measure? We can click on that and view the documentation for that particular data set. So here, this is going to build us the data model We can see all the tables in that particular data set, how they relate to each other, the filtering direction, that goes in both ways, for example, the cardinality, etc. And we can see here, whenever you see these icons, you can add documentation and comments. So we can see there's a comment already on this table. We can look at that, and it's some extra information, some data dictionary information, that this is sales only, not trade, and the currency. Anyone that has permissions to this workspace and who's given access to Sentinel can come and view, edit, update, etc. these comments. So let's scroll down a bit. We can see the measures, all the DAX calculations. We can see the calculated columns. And if you want to reuse one of these calculations, you can very easily click it, copy to the clipboard, and then reuse it in your own report. We then show the list of relationships, again with comments as well, and the list of columns on the right-hand side. Now, by itself, that's useful to have a list of columns in the dataset, but if we tick the Show Unused Columns box, it highlights which of these columns are actually being used and which ones are not being used. So anything in red is not used by a filter, a visual, DAX calculation, etc. Whereas anything in blue, we know if we're going to change one of these, there's a potential risk there. There's an impact on a report or a user, so we need to look to see where that impact is before we make that change. And then down the bottom we have the Power Query, which again we can look at to see where the data source is coming from, and also copy it to reuse it if we wanted to migrate to a data flow, for example, or copy that Power Query for a different report. We can also export this documentation to a PDF. We can click on Download Documentation button to generate a whole PDF full of documentation for the entire data set. This contains the table details, all of the comments, the connection details, refresh schedule, relationships, DAX calculations, calculated measures, etc. for all of the tables, including all of the Power Query as well. So you can use it for offline documentation. It helps with the disaster recovery as well. So if you need to recreate this data set, this gives you all the information you need to be able to do that. So let's go back to the portal. Whilst we're here on this report, there's a few other tabs we can look at. First of all, we'll look at backup history. What happens when something goes wrong? When someone deletes a report or makes a breaking change to a report? Well, if they delete it, we can come in here and just download the last backup that was made for that particular report, or indeed any version over history. And when we come to download one of these, it'll just download the PBIX file to my local PC, and I can then open it up in Power BI Desktop, and I can view that data set, I can view the report, I can click Publish to roll that report back in the portal. But I can also use that to compare it against the current report. So I can visibly look to see what's changed with the structure of the report, structure of the data set, or indeed the visuals on top of it. So using this, you can undelete essentially. You can get a report back up and running again if someone deletes it within a matter of minutes rather than days rebuilding it. But what if someone's made a breaking change to this report? They've changed something and broken a calculation. You get users starting to complain. You've probably never seen this report before. As a central competency center of Power BI, this may be created by someone out in a separate department. They've asked you to help investigate why this report's failed. Well, this is where change tracking comes in. Every time we take a backup of a report, it also looks for changes in that report. And we can choose any versions of this report. I'm going to choose these two here, run a comparison, and that's going to give me the high-level changes that happens to this report between those two dates. So we can see here, there's a visual that's had its Z order changed. That's the front to back, how visible something is. We've got this visual here, it's had its height and width changed to these values here. This particular visual's had its type changed from clustered column chart to a gauge. We've got a change to a visual level filter on the female sales visual, a change to one Power Query table and one measure. So let's say the problem that the users reported is this measure here, total sales. Well, we know if we just roll back the whole report, it's also going to roll back all of these changes as well. So it helps give you a very clear view on exactly what's going to be changed in that report if you do roll back. So let's have a look to see what the details of these are. What has been changed to total sales? Well, we can click on Show Details. Everywhere you see a yellow triangle, there's been a change. So let's look at measures. expand the second measure, and we can see that the calculation used to be sales amount plus tax and freight. It's now sales amount plus tax amount. So the key there is freight is no longer included. Now there's a couple of things you can do here. You can either copy this old calculation and manually redo that in the new version, or you can just roll back this whole version and get this new one. So now we've managed to get the report up and running again. We've recovered it, we know that it's back up and running, users are happy, but we need to do some investigation as to who changed that and when. Then we can investigate the why. And that's where the auditing comes in. So Sentinel stores a full log of all audit activity in your Power BI estate. It stores this in your own Azure SQL database. So you're then in full control of querying this data in any way you want. We provide you with a Power BI template to get started, which is what you're seeing on the screen now. But you're free to do with this whatever you want to do. So here we can see all the different operations that are tracked by Sentinel. And so we're looking at create report. Who's created a report here? That user's created this report in that workspace at that date and time. We can even do things like add IP address on here as well. There's all sorts of extra information that we can add on. Let's bring that on as well. So you can see where they were at the time they made that change. So we can see who's deleted a data set or even edited a data set to make changes. So you can combine this with the change tracking to get a full picture of what was done and when. And this extends to all sorts of activity, exporting, downloading information, updating apps, etc., unpublishing apps. And one of the key ones we see here is view report. Now this happens when someone consumes a report. They view the content of it. And if we filter by this, we can quite easily see exactly who has viewed which reports and when. So let's change the view of this and make it a little bit more useful. By putting some charts over it, we can very clearly see the level of adoption in your report. How are people using and consuming your content? Is that increasing, decreasing? And you can view this by workspace, by user, by report, by time of day, etc. Any metric you want. So let's have a look to see who's looking at this workspace here. Well, it's these 5 users. A total of 168,000 views over the last year, and we can see here the most prominent report is the Shark report, of which the demo account and my account are the 2 biggest consumers. So again, very good from an impact analysis. If you want to make a change to a dataset or a report, you know exactly who to go and talk to. These are the users that are going to be most impacted by those changes. So as well as exporting the usage logs to your database and the audit logs, Sentinel also exports your lineage, your documentation, your permissions, etc. So there's another Power BI template which we provide, which allows you to look into this in more detail. And so we've got a number of different pieces of information in here. Let's start with the data sources. So this is a very fast way of being able to explore the lineage and filter down to see what's going where. So here we've got our data source types. I'm going to choose SQL Server. Let's now pick a single database, or single server rather. This has got 3 databases, 2 different gateways in use, so let's choose a particular database, AdventureWorks. We can see it's using this particular gateway, and these are the SQL Server tables inside the database that are being exposed to Power BI. So if I want to do a GDPR audit, for example, I'm going to look at DIM customer. Where's that PII data being exposed? And we can see it's being exposed in these data sets, which exist in these workspaces. And as you can see, it's a multi-workspace. It covers the entire tenant. We can also view this graphically. By choosing a workspace, we can see all the different data sources there and how they map to different data sets, how they're combining together or being shared across different data sets. We also export permission data. So let's have a look at this. We've got workspace selected here. So we can select a particular workspace and we can see which users have different access rights to that workspace and which reports are included in that. And we can view this with respect to an app or a data set or indeed a report. If we flip that on its head and look at it from the user perspective, I can look at, let's go for this particular user here, and we can see all the different permissions that user has on these different workspaces. Now you can't get this from Power BI. You have to look at every single workspace individually. It's a very time-consuming process. Whereas Sentinel exposes it in a database for you, in your own database, with a very rich data model that you can use either the pre-canned report we provide or build your own reports over the top of it, or indeed an ETL platform to extract that data and do with it whatever you want on there. Let's change this to view apps. We can see this particular user here. I have permissions to those particular apps, etc. Sentinel also exports documentation into your own database as well. So we can see here, for example, we've got this workspace selected, this report. We can see these are the tables that exist inside the data set. And these are the DAX calculations and the measures that are being calculated. And we can also look at columns, for example. So here are all the columns in a particular, let's look at this table here. And that includes DAX calculations for calculated columns. We can look at data sources. Where's this information coming from? In this case, all the data is coming from a single AdventureWorks database on this server. And then partitions. Let's expand this to all tables again. So we can see all partitions and tables in the data set, when they were last refreshed, and the Power Query code that populates that particular partition. The final part of this is dashboards. We can see here for each dashboard which reports are included in that particular dashboard. If we have a look at all of the fields available, you can see here the rich set of tables that are available to you in this data model, from data sets, data flows, data sources, gateways, permissions, reports, workspaces, etc. It all flows into your database, so you can then write your own reports and calculations over the top of this. So how does this work behind the scenes? You can see on the right-hand side is the Power BI Sentinel service or set of services inside the Azure data centers. There's a cluster of virtual machines that do all the heavy lifting work, interact with the Power BI APIs, the Office 365 APIs. There's a back-end SQL database which stores all the metadata, the cached information that helps Sentinel run. And then at the bottom we've got the Sentinel front end, the GUI. On the left-hand side, you've got your environment. You've got your users at the bottom, your Power BI tenants here. There's two services you need to create inside your own Azure subscription to make Sentinel work. The top one is an Azure storage account, and this is used to store your backups. It's very important the backups are stored in your tenant because they contain your sensitive data. You don't want those leaving your tenant being stored somewhere else. Then we have an Azure SQL database. And again, this is in your tenant because it contains potentially sensitive data. And this is where we store audit logs, usage logs, lineage, documentation details, permissions, etc. And this database here is where you can hook into to create your own reports by feeding that into your own Power BI reports and publishing it to your own Power BI estate. So how do you go about setting up Power BI Sentinel? Well, all of this is detailed on our website at powerbisentinel.com/setting up Power BI Sentinel. And this talks you through the details of the Azure services you need, the configuration details, the expected costs, firewall details you need to add, etc. Everything you need is on this page that will really show you how to go about setting up the infrastructure necessary for Sentinel to work. You can create all of this in under an hour. It's not that arduous to set up. It also talks about permissions you need, how different permissions work, and then how to actually go about setting up Sentinel when you get in. So how do you go about getting started with Power BI Sentinel? Well, there's two ways of signing up. One is using a credit card online, and that creates a recurring monthly subscription, no commitment, and you can be up and running within an hour. Sentinel will then do its first scan overnight, so you'll be able to see the results first thing tomorrow morning. Or if you want to request an invoice, then you can pay on an annual basis through an invoice, click the button and get in touch and we can sort that out for you. All of the pricing tiers are on the pricing page. Sentinel's divided into three different tiers: Enterprise 250, 1000 and 5000. This relates to the number of reports that you have in your tenant, or rather the number of reports that you want to manage with Sentinel. Essentially think of these as the number of PBIX files in your tenant. Anything up to 250, up to 1000 or up to 5000. So how many users do you need for Sentinel? Well, typically we see most customers have between 2 and 10 Sentinel users. These are really users that you want to administer and govern your Power BI estate. Not really your report consumers, it's more of your admins, your management team, but it's really up to you who you want to invite to use Sentinel. Hopefully that's provided you with a good overview of what Sentinel can do, its capability, and how it can really empower you to really manage your Power BI estate far better than you've been able to in the past. Sign up today or get in touch with us if you have any questions. We'll be delighted to help.